Hey guys, welcome back to Feedback Loop. I am Joey,
And I'm Jeremy.
and this week we done it, man. We're
We did
on
it.
we're on album number 4 out of my 4 album journey through the Elephant Six, ending with Neutral Milk Hotels in the Aeroplane Over the Sea. A
Man.
song, an album that's very near and dear to me.
Yeah, why is it near and dear to you? You kind of teased this a little bit a week or two ago that this is it has some personal power within you. What happened with this album, or what was happening when you found this album?
What was happening when I found this album? It actually was fairly recent in the grand scheme of things. I think it was maybe like 5-ish years ago,
Okay,
but it was just a transitional period in my life
sure.
where I was about to have a daughter, and I had actually heard some of this album before then, but I hadn't really given it a fair chance until that time. And it just hit me. There's a specific song on this album that just connected with another transitional period in my life pretty
Okay,
deeply, and it all just hit me. So yeah,
interesting. We can talk about that when we get there. I have no idea from what I know of this album which track that would be, so it'll be fun to talk about when
yeah,
we get there, I guess.
yeah. I'll give you a heads up, and it's not what the song is technically actually about. It's
It's just
just the
what you
way that
got out of it.
yeah, it's the way that the first time I listened to the song, it connected with me in that way.
I feel that. I feel that a lot on this album specifically, because it's an interesting album,
Hmm.
and it has an interesting album cover as well, which
Yeah,
I'm not fully sure I can do it justice, but it looks like some old painting, maybe propagandastic painting. It kind of maybe looks like some propaganda of some sort, but there's a woman who appears to be on a boat or on a pier somewhere. She's sitting on something wooden over some
hmm,
water. There's a little boy beside her. There are a couple people in the background. There's a boat in the background. But this lady, her head, I can't tell. It looks like a tambourine, but it
I,
also kind of looks like it's a sandwich.
yeah.
So
I was always stuck between a melon and a tambourine, like a slice of cantaloupe or
yeah,
something.
that could be
But
as well. I'm gonna go with tambourine. I don't think
yeah,
there's a lot of
that's what I think
tambourine on
it
this
is.
album, but that's the common association that we both have is it's a tambourine or something else. So her head's a tambourine. She has her right arm extended in kind of like a, a salute of some sort. Maybe a Nazi thing. Maybe that's me looking too far into it. Maybe not.
It
We'll get to that.
Yeah, it's not you looking too far into it, but it is actually a postcard, like an
Okay.
old style vintage postcard, and I can't remember what the exact name of the postcard. I think it's like Bathing Beauty postcard or something. So it's just I don't know exactly where the postcard is from because they actually just found it a couple of years ago. Like just found
Oh,
the original postcard, I guess. But yeah,
interesting.
it's just like an old postcard, which fits with the some of the vibes, like time wise, I guess, time like era wise, that this song or this album kind
Yeah.
of portrays. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a postcard that they found like a couple of years ago, and they posted it online. They're like, "Oh my god, we found the postcard!"
Yeah. To be clear, they had the postcard back at the point that this album released. I'm assuming, and then lost it, and then found it again because this album came out in '98. This is not a new album. That
Yeah,
they just found the postcard, and they're like, okay, now we can release this album because we have album art, kind
yeah,
of a thing. It's an older album.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, somebody online. This album is very big on a few music boards. I mean,
I can tell.
it's pretty big in a few areas, rightly so, I think. But somebody on that message board found it and posted it, and we're like, "Hey guys, I found it in an antique shop." So, but
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
it's just cool.
It'd be fun as a fan to find that.
Oh yeah, I think so
Bef-
too.
Before we get into the album, I Tuesday came around. Right, we record these on Mondays. Tuesday came around. I was off on Tuesday, and I listened to this album for the first time on Tuesday while I was taking a shower. and I was so excited to talk about this, but I knew I couldn't talk to Joey about it because we had to wait a full week. So I just kind of like fucking stream of conscious blasted my notepad here. So I have a little bit of rambling thing that I'm just going to read off because I was so excited and I just had to get shit out.
Oh my
So
god.
it starts off, this is unprecedented. I'm not even through the album yet. I'm on track number 8, which is O Comely.
Mm-hmm.
On Tuesday at 3:45 p.m. I just brushed my teeth after a shower, and holy shit, this album is great. I want to text Joey and gush about this, but I can't, so I'm starting my notes already with this intro. The song is fucking killer. I'm excited to see what comes of this discussion. I think this was a perfect storm of my current mood, the journey we've been on, the last day of my paid time off, and what feels like destiny. I was kind of reflecting in the shower about how people always talk about wanting to experience something for the first time again. And I'm kind of clinging to that experience because I know that this album is going to stick with me. And I suspect that this is an album that you, Joey, would want to hear again for the first time.
Oh my god!
I think you nailed it.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh my god, that is amazing. I kind of had an inkling that you would at least not hate it. Like I thought you would like it, but I am
Right.
so glad to hear that you liked it that much because that pretty much sums up. I mean, Oh Comely, we'll get to it. It is an amazing track, and there's some
Yeah.
history behind a certain part of it that you might have found out. There's just like a little anecdote that I think is super cool about that track, and it's just an extremely long, awesome, great track, and it's a great track to have that moment on, I think.
Yeah. Now that the album's been completely overhyped, we can get into talking. I'll go first because
Okay.
generally that's what we've been doing on these journey things. Is that you're curious to see how I feel. I kind of already gave that out,
Yeah.
but I'm also going to combine tracks 1 and 2 together because I did so in my notes because it
Okay.
kind of just all flows together.
Yeah.
So track 1 is King of Carrot Flowers Part 1. Track 2 is King of Carrot Flowers Parts 2 and 3. We're just going to talk about them as a whole piece of work because
Awesome.
that's kind of how I interpreted them. I really like the guitar tone just right off the bat. It comes in with this acoustic guitar tone. It's got some like layered feeling vocals, and I really actually like this guy's voice, which might be a surprise. I think it's not as rough as a lot of the other ones that we've been doing, but there's something about it that just it feels good to me, and it reminds me of Jose Gonzales's vocals and his guitar playing and stuff, which is why, spoiler alert, next week we're going to be talking about Jose Gonzales. But a lot of this album kind of gave me that feel, and it feels good. It's a sound that is so just like pleasing to me.
Man, that is just amazing, and I'm so glad. I mean, I'm really glad you like his voice. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and you're gonna hear it a lot in this album. I love Jeff Mangum. Like, he's the vocalist for all you people out there and the guitar player. I just like the way he sings. I like his melodic choices, and you can hear it more on some of his live albums. Just like the way he sings, the notes he picks. He has lungs of like some sort of madman. He can sing forever, and just I love how you mentioned the tone. The tone on this acoustic guitar is so crisp. Like
It's phenomenal.
it cuts right to you, and it instantly kicks out with that. So I mean, like, as soon as the album starts, you're in it. It's like it cuts through that wondering if I'm gonna like it or not. At least to me, it cuts through all that and it just hits you, and you're like, okay, this is music right now.
Right.
I'm just listening to it.
It's so good. And then this for part 1 flows right into part 2, like I said, and it part 1 ends with some like droning notes that are being held
Yeah.
by like a synthesizer. I'm assuming they used it to loop it at Ord. Someone really does have lungs of fucking infinite capacity, but there's some droning notes that flow into part 2 under like a simple lo-fi guitar kind of a thing, and it just builds and it builds throughout part 2. And then what I'm assuming is part 3 is when the wailing guitar comes in and introduces the drums, and it just kicks off, and the trumpet hits, and Jesus Christ, I love it because it's so good that just the way it's all laid out, the build, the swelling of it, and then it punches you in the face. The trumpets, it's just God, it's so good.
It's amazing, and I don't know if I had mentioned this to you off podcast last time or on it, but one thing. So the horns, Scott Spillane, he's the main like trumpet player.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just great. I don't like just an amazing. Obviously, like the horns on this whole album are amazing. One person in particular, though, in their little horn section, Laura Carter, is currently the head of the horn section of another loved band by me, Nana Grizzle. She
Okay.
she is in Nana Grizzle, and it's just like I had heard of both of the bands separately and come
Right.
to love them both separately, and come to find out they share.
The sure link.
Yeah, and it was just like this crazy moment for me where I was like, okay, well, just two of my favorite bands are just like maybe she's the reason, maybe somehow like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I
But
believe it. I mean, she does a very very good job. I'm assuming on this album, whoever is involved in the horns on this album did 10 out of 10 job. I fucking love it.
yeah,
His
Scott
voice,
Spillane, he's the main guy.
yeah, and Jeff Magnum, right? Not Mangum.
No, it's Mangum.
Is it?
It actually is Mangum.
Okay. Everywhere I've seen has it as Magnum. So
Really? Well, they're probably wrong. I hate to.
okay, so Jeff Mangum, his voice, like you said, he has a way of singing that just feels good. There were some points in this album, and in part 3 specifically, that you can tell he's really pushing himself, and he's just giving it his all to and singing as loudly as possible to try and hit some of the higher notes. At some points, it feels like he kind of falls flat, but we can get to that later. I mean, I guess we don't really need to get to it at all. It's just that simple. That sometimes I just feel like he's trying to hit a note and just falls just a little bit flat, but it still fits with this whole like genre and the style and stuff. So it's not really a bad thing at all.
It definitely fits, like, I think the tone, which, I mean, I'm not a stickler for exact
right
notes, which
we
that's
come from very different perspectives on that.
Yeah, exactly. Like but even I don't know. Normally, I'd say something along the lines of like, I appreciate the effort. I can understand. Like, my mind can make up where they were going, so I understand. Like, what I like their energy or something. This dude, like, I just think it works. Whatever he does works with the music on here, and just I don't know. He's playing a lot of the times where his notes fall flat. It's because he is, like you said, he's just going all out with it. So I mean, like, it's kind of like you can hear the intensity in it. So it kind of
it's still impressive, even if he's not hitting the notes that I think he's trying to hit. It's still very very much impressive from what he's doing.
Man, I'm just already like I am just loving the fact that you love this so much, and I don't know. Are we okay to get into the lyrical content of these ones?
I mean, I think musically, this was the perfect intro to the album. Like I said, I started my shower with this song, and I was just like, yeah, this is fucking great. So, it's a perfect intro for this album, I think.
I agree. This song, like, it's one of the best intro songs I think has ever been on an album that I've listened to. Like,
yeah, definitely, probably the best that we've had on this podcast at the very least.
Oh shit!
But yeah, lyrically, I just it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this album is kind of that weird lyrical content that we talked about previously, and I was looking on Genius like I always do, and a lot of people at this point, I kind of wrote my notes chronologically, so I kind of come to an epiphany later in the album. Mm-hmm. But at this point in it, when I'm writing my notes, I'm just like, man, these Genius commenters have so many crazy fucking theories about hermaphrodites and Anne Frank and tarot and shit that I never would have thought to pick up on. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just write my own. I didn't want to like steal theirs and not really understand what the fuck was going on.
Yeah.
Later in the album, I kind of realized what they're talking about. But at this point, the first few lines I didn't really understand, but the rest of the song kind of seemed to imply that the singer's character was friends with someone whose parents were not a great couple and would always get in fights. And it kind of paints this scene of the singer being invited to his friend's house. He goes upstairs to his friend's room to hang out and do whatever kids do when they don't have computers, which is fucking. Downstairs, the friend's mom and dad are yelling and fighting, and upstairs the kids are falling in love, which kind of gives this dichotomy of the younger generation of kids falling in love and then the older generation of adults falling out of love with life and each other and just everything in general, which I thought was kind of a fun contrast.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, especially the first time I heard this song, I got the picture that it was Jeff's parents who were the ones doing the fighting. He had somebody over, and honestly, like as weird as it sounds, the first time I heard this song, I got the vision that they were like step siblings. Like, I don't know. This is it's weird, but there's a lot of weird stuff on this album.
Yes, for
But
sure.
like, I got the idea that it was like a stepfather stepmother situation, and then step siblings upstairs, and they were kind of just like, well, we don't know. We're in this living in this weird fucked up situation. Like, there's a line in here, and it's King of Carrot Flowers. I guess part 3 is the technical
Sure.
term for it. I call it Up and Over because I think that was the original one. But it's and dad and mom would drink until she was no longer speaking, and dad would dream of all the different ways to die, each one a little more than he could dare to try. So it's like it just paints such a cutting picture of this
Yeah.
abusive relationship where this mom, I mean, earlier she stabs the dad with a fork, and he's just like falling all
He
over the
spills
floor.
the garbage.
Yes,
Yeah.
all across the floor. And it's just nuts how clear he can paint that. So I'm like, there's this fucked up situation going on downstairs. Like, the step kids could be upstairs just like looking for any form of comfort that they could possibly be finding. But then, as you'll come to find out, as like you had mentioned about other people saying the Anne Frank references, it also got me thinking that maybe in his mind, it's not even a physical thing. Maybe in his mind, he is experiencing this with someone who he is relating very closely to, and that is Anne Frank through him reading her diary. But
Yeah.
that was like a 10th listen thing that I
Right.
started messing around with.
Yeah. There are a lot of those references, and I think it becomes a bit more clear later in the album.
Mm-hmm.
But I really didn't want to just dive in and say like, yeah, of course I picked up that he was talking about Anne Frank in a song where he's just talking about like a shitty parent relationship and falling in love with someone and fucking.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, if that's, I mean, and that's even looking pretty deep. Like, that's the thing. There's layers and layers and layers of what he's talking about
Right.
that, I mean, you can, like, that's one of the reasons why I love this album. You can listen to it so many times and you're still going to be like, oh my, like, I didn't know that. Or what, this is what he's talking about. Like, what you're talking about with the tarot cards. I figured, I didn't, like, think about that. I had never heard anything about that until I was doing some research for this.
Right.
I mean, something he says is, like, one of the very first lines, when you were young, you were the king of carrot flowers, and how you built a tower tumbling through the trees and holy rattlesnakes that fell around your feet. The tower in tarot card reading is a bad omen, and
Yeah.
rattlesnakes are the same in Christianity. So he's talking about, like, he's just setting up this whole picture of bad omens and bad things are coming, and just religious and mystical imagery that kind of gets expanded upon later in the album. And I was like, wow, I've listened to this album hundreds of times, never even thought anything more of those lines.
Yeah. In addition, the song title itself, "The King of Carrot Flowers," that has some like symbology to it. I was reading. I don't remember specifically what they said, but I think the king generally in some contexts means like the most experienced with, or like the the pinnacle of
Mm-hmm.
something, and then carrot flowers kind of symbolizing experience or wisdom. So
Mm-hmm.
there was some weird contrast between being so young and so naive, but also being the best at being experienced and wizened and stuff like that,
I mean,
which I never would have picked up on ever in my life if I hadn't seen
yeah,
someone else talking about it.
and that's the kind of stuff. It's like there's become such a cult following with this album that I feel like that type of stuff really does come through. And just writing these lyrics, it's like, how could you ever? There's so many things, like
Yeah,
theories that I have come up with, even on my own, or just that I've
right.
read, that I'm like, that's so far fetched. But then you think about all the other things that have to be true about this album, and you're like, okay, maybe he was thinking of that. Like, there's a
Yeah,
line,
it's insane
yeah,
the
and
depth that is in this album.
But I'm just gonna stop gushing for a second. Like it's just so this song it starts off pretty dark. I mean, there's just bad things to come, talking about a bad relationship, maybe some trying to detach himself from the world, like he's trying to escape into comforts in the upper room. I like what you said about that dichotomy between the young loving and the old falling apart, the marriage falling apart, the
Right.
like that, because that, I mean, dichotomy, just like the dichotomy of human nature versus kind of moral obligation or religious obligation is, I think, a pretty big theme in this album. So kind
Yeah,
of
for sure.
what humans are want to do and what humans are telling other humans that they should be doing, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that was a
Okay.
lot of time spent on
I'm
the first track.
oh my god.
but but
This is gonna be a
we're gonna get
long
to
one.
it.
I'm sorry.
It's going to be a long one. We should have given a disclaimer. It's probably going to be the longest episode we've done, honestly, because we both really enjoy this album for completely different reasons, and we have different context for it, and we both wrote a whole lot of notes. So just
Oh my
fucking
god.
buckle up. Take a break at this point if you want to just pause it,
Yeah.
go get a coffee, something. Take a break. We'll be
Yeah.
here.
Do something. I'll be here forever. Like I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, this podcast will exist for an indefinite amount of time. I don't think it's going to be going away until
Yeah.
we go away,
Or until the internet goes away.
or until the internet goes away. But before that happens, we better be in an aeroplane over the sea.
Yeah, spreading our ashes. Once we're dead and then we can't make the podcast anymore, our podcast will be the ashes that gets thrown out over the world, leaving our impact on this planet.
That's deep, man. That's
Yes.
deep.
Yes.
Also, the third track is titled "In the Aeroplane Over the Sea," as is the album. It's the title track.
Yeah, definitely.
So early in the album, I think this is a pretty early point. A lot of times, the title tracks for albums don't come until like the middle or towards the end, but this is right up front, just after the intro.
Yeah, and it's got the crisp acoustic guitar tone coming back in the beginning. Like
it's so good.
Yeah, and
it's so good.
The way kind of this type of stuff is what I was trying to set up with the Beulah album, where they start off kind of simple and just layer more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
But they, like I said, they just do it so much better. It's just it's so good. They start off with the acoustic, then all the backing instruments come in. There's a singing saw, that kind of spacey,
yes,
like that sound. That is a singing saw. So it's just that. At least that's what I've read that it is.
Sure.
It could,
I can't tell you you're wrong.
I don't know. And then the horns come in, the drums. It just builds and builds and builds, and that's just. There's so much. You can hear the sound of progression so much on this album, and I love it so much. I'm going to say those words so many times in this podcast. I just love it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, it's an experiment of layering and building musically, but it's also like a lot of softer instrumentation and stuff. It's not like it's abrasive, like it's just a lot of noise coming at you. Like the trumpet solo comes in, it's very like soft and gentle. And really the whole track to me felt very like floaty, which makes sense. If it's in the aeroplane over the sea, there's the waves of the sea crashing, there's the airwaves kind of floating, and that sound saw, or the whatever singing saw as you called it, gives it kind of these like almost eerie, like windy sound effects going, like there's just a lot of wind, which there would be if you're up in the sky or if you're down by the sea, like there's a lot of wind. So I thought texture wise, it's a very satisfying song.
I 100% agree with you. Like ever since you said the words trumpet solo coming in softly, literally I can just play the trumpet solo in my head because it's just like a nice little melody.
Yeah.
And there's just so many things about it that are just so memorable, and I need to stop gushing because then we're going to spend another 25 minutes on this track alone. So it's like there's a lot of different textures happening. Like you said, they all work really well together. They're not abrasive. It's just a nice little trip through this, I don't know, this experiment.
The soundscape.
Yeah, it's a soundscape. There we go. That is brilliant. I love that.
Thanks. I'm pretty much a genius at this point. Lyrically, though, on this one, again, I noted that the Genius people or the people commenting on the Genius page seem to think there's some deep connection or context with Anne Frank, but at this point, I'm just like, I don't really see it right now. It seems
Hmm.
like they do this on every track on the album where they try to tie in Anne Frank and stuff. So I'm going to stop pointing it out at this point, and I'm just going to go with my
Yeah.
own interpretation from here. That's kind of a lie because later it all clicks and I go back to it. But
Yeah.
for now, I'm just going to go with my interpretation of the lyrics isolated from everyone else's context. So the lyrics to me in the song are just talking about being young and enjoying it while it lasts, knowing that one day you're going to die, which is a thing
Hmm.
that we talked about on the Apples in Stereo album. And I remember specifically, Joey, you found comfort kind
Oh
of in
yeah.
that knowledge where you die. I really like the ending. The last like verse or couple lines says, "And when we meet on a cloud, I'll be laughing out loud. I'll be laughing with everyone I see. I can't believe how strange it is to be anything at all." And
Oh my god.
to me, I got from that he's saying that when he dies and goes to heaven, he'll be excited and he'll be laughing with everyone, but he's also going to be kind of taken aback and thinking it's weird that there is an afterlife and that the
Hmm.
fact that he is anything at all at that point is just kind of surprising.
Yes, and oh my, it's just that line. I actually had said I was going to say something about that line, but you made it. You put it so beautifully. So I'll go ahead and talk about a different line. And it. So this album, like at this point, you're right. There's no direct, real reference to Anne Frank, but it does. Like there's other things that happen later that kind of tie everything together. Believe it or not, the Anne Frank thing. You know what? I'll save it for later. But as far as re-listens, like what I was talking about, like in the previous song, where you can listen to this album so many times and still find new meanings. The bridge of this song, the first three little lines of this bridge, just blow me away because of like it was. I feel like it was my first real brush with like really smart imagery
Right.
in a song, but the lines are now how I remember you, how I would push my fingers through your mouth to make those muscles move. And
Yeah.
what he's talking about there is Anne Frank, her diary is her mouth because that's how she reaches. She's speaking. She can speak to anyone at any time in any era. That is her mark on the world, which is a theme explored in this song, but that's her mark.
Yes.
That's her mark made on the world because she wrote her diary and it got everybody can read it now. Her mouth is her diary. She's speaking to the world through it, and that's how he remembers her. He remembers the first time that he read the diary. He remembers. He feels like he can remember her through this. It's like a portal back to the past that they both exist in. So they're I don't know. They're just kind of together in that moment. He would
Yeah.
push his fingers through like he would push his fingers through her mouth to make the muscles move. That like he's just thumbing through the book, just reading the book. But it's like the first time you hear that line, you're like, okay, what does this mean? And then it clicks, and you're just like, this is just perfect imagery for reading a book that somebody else has written, cataloging a significant portion of their life, and that they're speaking to you. So like, I don't know, it's just like it just blew me away the first time I
Yeah.
realized it.
It's a very strange metaphor,
Hmm.
but it's very like it nails it. Like I mean, like you said, it's the perfect imagery for this.
It's oh my god, like it's I don't know, but anyway, with the making your mark on the world, as far as the and one day we will die and our ashes will fly from the aeroplane over the sea. That's another line in the second verse, and it's something that I referenced in whenever we were introducing the song. But not only is it thinking about the fact that one day we're going to die and just I don't know live while you're young because I don't know like you said the next it just it talks about I'm trying to explain too many things all at once because I'm freaking out over
I
here,
mean,
man.
it's a thick album with
It's
context, so a lot of it. There's a lot to talk about.
yeah, but anyways, the ashes can represent the mark that you're making on the world because one day you're gonna die and little tiny pieces of you can be seen throughout the whole world regardless of what you've done regardless of how like I don't know just how you've lived your life you are going to be spread throughout a portion of the world that you lived in, and will at least have your memory passed on, and in that way you will be real through it. I mean, Anne Frank's diary, not to reference something that hasn't been set in concrete yet, but it's her. She still exists
Yes.
because of. I mean, she still exists because she wrote that her diary, and because now everybody can at least feel like they knew her, so she's never gonna die due to that. I guess truly, the memory of her will never die, at least, and
Yeah.
that's, I don't know. It's just
No,
something nice to
I
think
think you said it very succinctly when you said he was viewing her journal as some kind of portal that he
about.
can kind of look back and see, kind of experience what she experienced vicariously through her journal, which I think is it's good imagery, and it's just, I don't know, it's good. I like it.
Man, and
It's good.
if at any point I start just rambling on too much, even if you have to cut it out, just like
Oh, I'm not cutting
stop.
anything.
Okay,
This is gonna be
just
this is gonna be a 2.5 hour episode, and people are gonna complain, but it's good. I don't give a shit. Fuck them.
because I literally could just sit here and talk and talk and talk about this, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
knew you would. That's why I'm so excited, and I have been all week. Like, at the fucking first time I listened to this album, I was like, "We need to talk about this," but I can't talk about it yet. I gotta save it for the podcast.
oh my god, I'm just like, I'm over here normally, and this is going to be a little bit of a behind the scenes peek. We normally talk about how like we get nervous right before the podcast
Yeah,
starts recording, and we both said that we were more excited than nervous this time, but now like the excitement is bubbling over in me, and I'm just
yeah.
like, I'm sitting in my
We're
chair.
just giddy little kids.
Yeah, like I feel like I'm about to go see a Justin Bieber concert, and like
Yeah,
I'm just like,
let's do that. Let's do that after this. Is Justin Bieber still tour? I'm sure he's
I'm
touring,
sure
right?
he does.
I
Yeah,
mean, not right now, but
I don't know. Maybe he is right now. Who knows? Like,
we'll go to the nearest Justin Bieber show together and just
just
fangirl
freak
out.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh my god.
we can go
But yeah.
together
Okay.
in a
Yeah.
costume as maybe a two-headed boy.
That would be pretty sweet, because then I could be on the right head and you could be on the left head, and we'll just. No,
I don't know. I don't want to be on the left. I want to be on the right head.
I was about to make a backup backpack reference.
Holy shit, Joey! The people don't even know about the backup backpack. We'll pitch that at a later date, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't worry. Don't. It's something. Keep listening, and eventually you'll find out what the backup backpack is. But
Yeah, maybe
two-headed.
if we don't forget. Two-headed boy. Track number 4.
This okay. I'm gonna wait for a second. But this song, it starts off with just him playing guitar. It's just Jeff Manga playing guitar, and it's him. It's pretty simple, just him playing his acoustic guitar, singing, and he kind of like turns up his intensity at the end of each verse, which is something that I just love. Like you talked about, you can hear him actually like straining sometimes to just scream out these lyrics, and this is just a good example of that. I think the last 2 lines on each of the verses at the beginning.
Yes, this was the clearest example of what I was saying about that, where he's very clearly straining and pushing his voice to hit the highest notes, and again, sometimes it feels like he's falling flat, but maybe he's nailing it. But regardless, he's fucking giving it his all, and
Yeah.
it comes through very clearly. I think a lot of the song is loud and aggressive in ways, but as you mentioned, it builds and builds, except for the last verse, and the last verse kind of chills out, giving it this nice release of that energy, and it ties in with the lyrics, which we haven't gotten to. But after that, there's that release. Towards the end, he's just kind of like vocal riffing, kind of like humming and like making laws and does and d's and stuff, which is just kind of like it's a nice release. I don't know how to say it in any other way. It feels like all that tension that was building and building and building is just kind of dispersed.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let you go first on the lyrics, because I have a lot to say about.
Yeah, I had a lot to say, and this track and the next one, even though the next one doesn't have lyrics, were the tracks that kind of made it click what everyone had been screaming about in the Genius comments. But yeah, so there are 4 verses, I think, in this track. Yeah, so the first verse, He talks about a two-headed boy floating in glass, tapping on his jar, which gives you the imagery of some mutation or science experiment being trapped in a Kolto tank. If you're a Star Wars nerd, those floating Healy tanks, and seeking help. Right, he's just kind of floating there, trapped. He's being experimented on. Um, but verse 2 comes in, and the singer's telling the two-headed boy to enjoy life and dance around and have fun, basically to enjoy his life despite it being fucking awful, or trying to make it as good as possible, which in hindsight, from something I drew at the end of the album, I think the song is from the perspective of one of the researchers or scientists that are experimenting on him that maybe has a softer heart than everyone else and is trying to make his life a little bit less awful, but we can get to that.
Hmm.
Then the chorus comes in, and it seems to be that they're torturing him or experimenting on him to the point that he passes out or he dies, which is just kind of dark. And then the third verse gets darker. And initially, it seemed to me that it was about the two-headed boy making music for his lover, who is also being experimented on, and she's actually choking and can't breathe, but he's just trying to calm her down and let what might be her last moments end with some like nice, pleasant music, kind of like the Titanic sinking, musicians playing as the sink ships kind of a thing. I
Yeah.
think there's some confusion in me about that point because, again, towards the end of the album, that made me think that the scientist was the one that he was in love with. But I don't think they would be doing those kind of experiments on her, so it's not super clear. Maybe you can clear that up in a second. But the chorus comes in and repeats, and because of the prior verse being about someone else being experimented on in my context, it seemed to be about his lover dying to experimentation. And then the song slows down in the fourth verse because he's sad. He's grieving the loss of his lover, and this is
Hmm.
when the genius commenters start to make sense. The verse, the last part of the last verse, he says, "The world that you need is wrapped in gold silver sleeves left beneath Christmas trees in the snow, and I will take you and leave you alone, watching spirals of white softly flow over your eyelids, and all you did will wait until the point when you let go." Which I'm not good with history, so I did a little boopity boop research here. The Nazis apparently had covered up a lot of their death camps with like fir trees and or Christmas trees that weren't Christmas trees because they weren't chopped down and in people's houses.
Hmm.
But it seems like it implies that he was being experimented on by Nazis during World War II or whatever. And then when they got busted or they got routed or whatever, they left them underground, these experiments, and just kind of like let them exist under the Christmas trees to die alone, kind of a
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah. It's
That's what I got, Joey. Tell me why I'm wrong.
no, I don't think you're wrong because I think I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I don't know if you're right either. Like so many things have been said about this song about like even what the two-headed boy
Yes.
is it a person, is it an idea, is it two people connected, is it
Yep.
a cassette tape, is it like what is it? But
Yeah, I think it gets a little bit clearer and also muddier as the album goes on what the two-headed
mhm.
boy represents to me.
It's very hard, like this song in particular is very hard for me to come at from an objective, like take an objective look at, because I had mentioned a song hitting a point in my life where there was another transitional point in my life, and this is that song. Like from the very beginning of this song, most of the lyrics related to me in a way that the first time I heard it, it made me think of my kind of adolescence, I guess, like when I was like a preteen ish. So I was raised Catholic, went to a Catholic school for up until sixth grade, and just was raised in it, was as much of a believer as a young child can be, very into it. And around that age, maybe fifth grade ish, started to just, have doubts, started to question things, started wanting to understand more things. So from the very beginning, two headed boy, all floating in glass, the sun is past, now it's blacker than black. Like, I was the two headed boy. One of my heads was the new me that's questioning things. One of the heads is the old me that is still seeing things the way that I was brought up in, and I was
Right.
just sitting there, stagnant, floating in this jar, and the sun, the light that I thought I knew, is gone, and now everything is just black. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the world is, and I don't know. It's and then just the next verse, two-headed boy put on Sunday shoes and danced around the room to accordion keys, like just the mental image of Sunday shoes, going to church, going to Sunday school, like that, it just hit home with me again.
Yeah.
With the needle that sings in your heart, it's my heart questioning what is happening out there, catching the signals that are sounding in the dark. These signals are coming out of the darkness, making me question all the things that I've believed my entire life. It's just, it was, it was like, so, it hit so close to home that I couldn't believe that I was hearing it, I guess, for the first time.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've shared this. Like, this is why I like music, and this is why I enjoy the fact that we have this podcast and that we're talking about this, because fucking music is and always will be what you get out of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily matter what the singer intends, it's how it's
Mhm.
interpreted and how it applies to you and how it helps you through shit or how it helps you reflect on shit. Like it's mind-blowing that a song that, in my opinion, in my mind, was about a scientific experiment from Nazis, was about
Mhm.
you having this kind of crisis of faith. And they're two completely different like storylines and two completely different contexts, but they're both equally valid because, I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, pretty much everything in this you could tie to your personal experience.
Yeah, it was just so like, and that's the thing. Like you said, that's what's great about music, because who says that it's not about both of those things? Like
Right.
who says that the way he wrote it? Because I mean, if we're going with the whole going off of a first listen, you wouldn't even think that this was specifically about Anne Frank, but you could tie it to old like Holocaust era, World War II era type,
Right.
not like Nazis or something. But
Yeah,
it's
I would not have tied it to Nazi experimentation. If it wasn't for everyone screaming in the Genius comments
yeah,
about it, it was clear to me that there was someone being experimented on, or that I mean, there's a man in a jar kind of thing. So the literal aspects of it are there, but I would
yeah,
not have tied it into Anne Frank in any way, shape, or form.
yeah. It's and the thing is, there's such a cult. I hate to call it a cult, but it kind of is
Oh, for sure.
around this album, around this band in general, that people kind of know the history of the songwriting process of this album.
Right.
So, I mean, there's so much research that has gone into every single line of this album and
Yeah.
what Jeff might have been thinking when he was writing them. But yeah, for the first listener, like, it's overwhelming almost to kind of get into
Yeah.
and see what people are, like you said, they literally are like screaming. People are freaking out saying like, this line references this line in Anne Frank's diary where it's like talking about this and this and this and this, and that's what,
Yeah.
and it probably was, like, honestly, but like nobody would know that, and that's what's great about it, is that he can write lyrics that are so specific to him that can still be interpreted in such different ways and mean such great things to other people, I guess.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the whole cult community thing around this album, and that's why I was kind of hesitant to bring in initially like the Anne Frank and the Nazi and even the hermaphrodite stuff. Like there's a lot
Mhm.
that I saw people were screaming about early in the album. That it's just like, I think these people are reading maybe a little bit too far into this shit. That they're just
Yeah.
seeing what they want to see. They've developed their own narrative to it, and they're passing it off as fact. Granted, I know Jeff himself has apparently a history of explaining song tracks
Yeah.
when he does his live shows, so I'm sure that there's a lot more validity there than I was giving them credit for. And I
Yeah.
think I got to that point in the next track, which actually doesn't have vocals, so maybe I was the fool the whole time. Track
Yeah, I
5
bet you were the fool.
is the fool. It flows in from the last track. It's all connected. A lot of the songs on this album just kind of flow together. They're continuously mixed, I believe is the technical term for it. But this one comes in with some like very somber trumpets and like a militant snare cadence, and it sounds like maybe some accordion backing it up. And it feels like the score of like a war film. Like you'd hear
Mhm.
this when you're watching a war movie as the
Yep.
protagonist is crawling on the ground and everyone's dead or dying around him and he's just trying to make it to safety. Also, side note, totally different context. The vibraphone in the song comes in so subtly and it's so mellow and I fucking love it.
Oh, do you?
I
The vi-
do. It's so good. It's so good.
I told you, man. They must have just had a vibraphone laying around somewhere, and like
Yeah.
everybody got to use
Everyone
it.
dipped it a little bit.
But
But
I
yeah,
love it. I love it. It's so
it,
great.
it is good. The song gets a little bit optimistic in the middle, I felt, but it's still
Mhm.
like somber and reflective, I think.
Yeah.
And this is the point. There aren't any lyrics, like I said, but having this pause to kind of reflect on it and the tone of the music itself kind of made me rethink a lot of the prior album or
Hmm.
the prior songs on this album. Where Two Headed Boy, I don't think was necessarily some freak that they created in a lab. It maybe this is me just taking with what other people were running, but there were mentions of hermaphrodites. So maybe Two Headed Boy, he felt like he was some kind of freak, like
Hmm.
as if he had two heads because he was born a hermaphrodite. So in the first track, you know, he was raised a hermaphrodite. He finds someone else who has a hermaphrodite, or maybe it's just a projection of himself, his friend from the King of Carrot Flowers, and he falls in love with them. Nazis happen to find both of them when the war happens, and they take both of the hermaphrodites into the lab to experiment on because it's an anomaly,
Hmm.
right? And they experiment, and then the two-headed boy hermaphrodite not actually having two heads, his friend dies. And at this point, with the music, I'm not sure if he's escaped because it got a little bit optimistic, or if he was buried under the ground, but I feel like it would become clear towards the end of the album, is what I said. And it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily, but it also does in some ways. And there's a lot of weird shit that happens that I call out towards the end of the album.
Yeah. This song, like you definitely hit the nail on the head with the war march kind of feel, and that's what kind of I don't know how this song made you rethink Two-Headed Boy. The next song made me rethink the rest of the songs before this because the next song is where I started to kind of pick up on what other people were saying. The first time,
Yeah,
because the first few times I listened to the album, I didn't look up the lyrics. I didn't do anything like that. I was kind of just listening, trying like kind
right.
of vibing it out. I wasn't even really paying attention to the lyrics, but I just kind of caught glimpses. But
Yeah,
this
I
song,
did not know what I was in for when it, like I wrote that post, that little blurb at the beginning on Tuesday, just from listening to the music the way I do. Like
yeah,
what I was ranting about and so excited to talk about was just the music. I didn't pay attention to the lyrics. I had no idea what this album was about. I still don't know necessarily what this album's about in full, but like I had no idea what I was getting into until I started getting my notes together for this. I'm just like, holy shit, this is gonna take a lot longer than I anticipated because there's so many layers to it.
yeah, definitely. Like this, and this song kind of just as a little end note, like I view this not necessarily as a palate cleanser, but it's a nice little kind of break because Two-Headed Boy, like maybe in the grand scheme of things, like what he was actually talking about, or I don't know, I hate to say that, but like maybe it wasn't as intense as the experience that I had, or that you like the dark as the experience that you described listening to the
Right.
song. Like maybe it was something entirely different, but given how I experienced Two-Headed Boy, it was nice to have this kind of break. It was like a little 2 minute
Yes.
kind of like I know what I'm getting here. It's just marching, continuous, forward moving music taking me to the next song. And it was just, it
Yeah,
breaks it up
it's
pretty nicely.
yeah, it's a very good like reset on the mood of the album as well. I think I don't want to say this ends necessarily Two Headed Boy's story, but I feel like at this point it's maybe like a flashback or it's jumping to a different time and place or to a different
Yeah.
focus at least. And there
Yeah.
are some threads tied through, but I'll get to that later.
Well, what time and place would that be? Maybe Holland in the year of 1945?
That's a very good guess. I think that sound. Yeah, I could definitely see that being the time and place for the next part of the album. Maybe even the next
Well,
track,
man.
which is titled
Yeah.
Holland 1945.
There we go. There we go. We did it.
We did it.
So this song. What
This
do you
song,
think of this song, huh? Huh?
this
Huh?
song, this song, this song, the one right
Yeah,
here.
this
Huh?
song right here.
1945.
This song right here, man.
It's got an upbeat acoustic intro. Again, I love the acoustic guitars on this album. There's after the intro, there's a lot of distortion that comes in with the drums and the guitar and the bass. It's a very upbeat song overall. And there's trumpet. There's also a trombone. It appears in the song. They're both fucking dope. I just love them
Mm-hmm.
to death in the song. I think musically, otherwise though, it's a pretty generic rock track. I didn't have a lot of notes to call out the music separately.
Yeah, definitely musically, like I like the intro to the song just because of the energy, where it starts
Yeah,
out with that acoustic, and then it cuts out, and you hear Jeff go 1 2 1 2 3,
yeah,
and then it hits in with the extreme like fuzzy distortion,
yeah.
and
Lots of
it's just a
fuzz.
nice feel. Yeah, but like it's not anything crazy musically. I don't think there's a ton of like horns coming in over xylophones, over organs, over whatever.
Right.
It's just pretty straightforward.
It's a
But
very jammy track.
this song, yeah, this song is the song where I started. This is actually the song that kind of made me do a little bit of research to kind of come up with some Anne Frank connections of my own, because I don't know. It was just talking about the only girl I've ever loved was born in 19 or was born with roses in her eyes, and then they buried her alive one evening 1945. And it kind of made me think. I was like, okay, 1945, like whatever. And it's kind of made me think to the funeral march type thing, or
Right.
and then one of the lyrics is uh what was it? And then they buried her alive one evening 1945 with just her sister at her side, and only weeks before the guns came and rained on everyone. And I was like, I think I've heard that somewhere before. And I remembered hearing like something about Anne Frank and her sister died like weeks before Auschwitz was like liberated or gotten by the British people. And that was a thing that like they said for a long time. I don't Now they're debating on whether or not it's actually true, but at the time of him
Right.
writing this, that was kind of like the belief that she died like weeks before that. And I was kind of like looking back at some other lyrics, and I was like, is this song about Anne Frank? And then I started looking more and more and more into it, and kind of came to
Yeah.
the conclusions that other people came to.
Yeah, no, I think for sure this is the first track that like explicitly ties in to Anne Frank, and it makes
Mm-hmm.
the other songs tie in to Anne Frank in hindsight as well. But yeah, this one for sure is the biggest call out, or so far at least, on the album.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like really weird metaphors and imagery that I can't really decipher in this track lyrically.
Mm-hmm.
This is again, I feel like it was maybe passing the focus from the two-headed boy to Anne Frank, but it kind of comes back around, I think, towards the end. Specifically, the last verse in the song I called out because it's just awful and perfect, and it's horrible, but I love it. It says, "And here's where your mother sleeps." And here's the room where your brothers were born, indentions in the sheets where their bodies once moved but don't anymore. And it's so sad to see the world agree
Yeah.
that they'd rather see their faces filled with flies, all when I'd want to keep white roses in their eyes. And it's just like people would rather just murder all of these children than to just let them exist and have a happy area.
Yeah. It's that like this whole song is just an intense song once you really start looking at it. Like that last verse especially, it's just yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, this whole song is about kind of what it's I don't know, I always hate to say like this song is about this. This is kind of what I've gotten from this song, and
Right.
other people have also gotten. But like the chorus comes in, but now we must pick up every piece of the life we used to love just to keep ourselves at least enough to carry on. And it seems to be okay. So Holland, 1945. History of the song. Jeff Mangum could not decide on whether to call this song Holland or 1945 because Anne Frank and her family had to evacuate Germany to Holland. whenever, I think it was 1933, whenever the Hitler took power, I guess, or whenever the Nazis came into power, and then she died in 1945. So there
Right.
were two significant parts of her life, and seemed to hint at she moved to Holland, leaving behind her life, and that's where the chorus comes in. But now we must pick up every piece of the life we used to love, just so they can have the strength to continue living.
Right.
And then the last verse, like you said, just paints a picture where it's like, this is what we used to have, and now we can't, like you said, because they just can't let people exist.
Yeah, they'd rather see
Just
their faces filled with flies,
uh, it's
which is
just,
nuts.
yeah. And then the White Roses, just a little tidbit. The White Rose, it was kind of a resistance group that they were trying to end the Nazis or like fascism, and just, I don't know, they were kind of struck down, as a lot of other people were, but just
Yeah, it
he's
was a resistance movement kind of
sympath
thing.
yeah, it's just, I guess, showing Jeff sympathizing on the other side, which, I mean, of course, of course he does, like,
Because
of course
he's a sane,
any
normal human being.
yeah, but just for context of the song, that's like where that fits it. Like, just one more layer of him just adding something, because I didn't
Right.
know that before I
Me either.
started doing research on this song. Like, but I don't know. It's just he adds so many little details that they're just little Easter eggs almost. But you can't call them Easter eggs because they're meant to be there and
Yeah,
meant to
they're
be.
references.
Yeah, yeah, references. There you go. That's, what am I doing over here? I'm just freaking out, man. That's what's happening.
We're all freaking out today. Even the people listening, they're almost an hour into this episode now, and
Oh
we're
my
like
god.
halfway. We're halfway, boys.
Oh my god. Kind of.
I
We're on
told
track.
you.
We're on track 6 of 11. Oh god, we are halfway.
Yup. But it's fine. We're moving on from track 6 now. We've spoke our
Yeah.
piece. Track 7, "The Communist Daughter," which is
Yes.
an interesting song title.
Yes. And okay, so this song, it's kind of just acoustic with some spacey songs in the background. I kind of treat this song as a vibe shift. I hate, like, to me, because it kind of like, so there was The Fool, which kind of transitioned into Holland 1945, which is really upbeat, and then you get brought back down kind of with Communist Daughter. It's like pretty chill before the
Yeah,
next song.
I really like the
But
music in "Communist Daughter" for what it's worth. It's got a lot of like you said, some spacey kind of screeching noises and some
mhm.
other like sound bites that are under that clean acoustic guitar and the low vocals. It just, I don't know, it gives it kind of this, not, I don't want to say trippy because it's such a like cliche thing to say, but it feels
Yeah,
like you're kind of like just floating through space.
yeah, it's man, this song, I I'm gonna kind of go in the camp of the cult for this song, just
Okay.
because it's such like a little song, but I feel like kind of the fan accepted theory is a pretty good example of something that I was talking about earlier, of the dichotomy between human nature and morality.
Yeah.
And so the chorus to this song, just little bit, it's a sweet communist, the communist daughter, standing on the seaweed water, semen stains the mountaintops, semen stains the mountaintops. So right here, sounds pretty weird just to begin with.
Yeah.
It's
This song
it,
cranks up the weird imagery.
yeah. So, but in if we're staying in the era of World War II, communism was staunchly against fascism. Fascism is essentially what was coming into power. It's how, like,
Right.
the communists were almost like the good guys. And I hate, like, not saying that communism should be associated with the bad guys. That's kind of like a red
They're different
scare.
systems of belief.
Yeah, they're different systems of belief, but in this situation, communism was against the bad guys, so
Right.
therefore they were the good guys. And so she is the communist daughter. She is the good one, standing on the seaweed water. He says standing on the seaweed water, giving some sort of imagery of walking on water, which something we didn't talk about in King of Carrot Flowers Part 2. He brings in cranks up some religious imagery by just screaming, "I love you, Jesus Christ!
Yeah,
Jesus Christ, I
yeah,
love it!"
we
Like,
totally glossed over it, but
yeah,
yeah.
but that happens, and he's gone on record saying like, "I'm not like." It's more of like a not necessarily like a metaphor or anything, but it's just like he's just saying it as kind of like a placeholder for like somebody that he loves. Like it's not a song about specifically loving Jesus Christ or specifically loving Christianity. It's just like,
Right.
I don't know, but it's
He said,
more,
"Jesus
I
Christ, I
guess,
love
meant,
you." Like it's
yeah, like,
a passive phrase kind of thing.
yeah, and so it's just, and to introduce some religious imagery, and she's being, it's just keeping with the religious imagery, and Seaman standing the mountaintops just is a way of saying snow-capped mountains in a very male-centric way.
Yeah.
Mountaintops that are covered in white stuff, that is snow, but it's, but it kind of ties into the end of the first verse, which is talking about Anne Frank in this headcanon and wanting something warm and moving, bends towards herself, the soothing, proves that she must still exist. She moves herself about her fist, which
Yeah.
is
She's masturbating.
believed in. Yeah, it's. I was gonna try to go a different way, but there. Yeah, it's, and just wanting some sort of human pleasure in a time of just absolute uncertainty, fear, just not knowing what's gonna happen, and it's kind of exploring the taboo of that, which from the male centric version of Seaman Stains the Mountaintop, makes me think that the taboo is specifically female sexuality in that time rather than just sexuality in general. But I mean, given the religious connotations in other songs, it could just be sexuality in general. I just choose to believe it's more specifically female
Yeah. I mean,
sexuality. But
a lot of this album has a lot of that sexual context, so
yeah,
it's definitely not a far reach to say that it's definitely sexual in nature, but this
yeah,
one I agree could possibly be more specifically for Anne Frank and female sexuality in general. I
yeah,
noted on this track that the imagery was very weird, and outside of it being clearly about her masturbating, I was unsure what the rest of the song was about. And I said, hopefully Joey can clue me in because I don't really care to keep reading these essays that genius commenters are posting.
yeah. It's. I mean, I think it also can go back to, like we said in the beginning, the relation of the young love and the old abuse or fighting or destroying. Like, she is in her space, she's upstairs in the attic, experiencing this this human nature wanting some sort of comfort in these crazy times, when right outside, in the first track it's downstairs, but right outside bombs are being dropped. This,
Yeah,
like, war is happening, people are being rounded up like animals, and just, I don't know, just
I like
the
that.
thought.
I didn't tie that together. Where like the
Yeah,
first track, she's upstairs with the singer or whatever, and they're having the sexual encounter while there's so much conflict going on just on the other side of a wall. But that's exactly like the same thing that's happening in Anne Frank's life here, and that's I never would have picked up on that. So I think that's cool.
it's, yeah. But I'll stop talking about this 2 minute song for a second, so we can, so we can.
Oh boy, if it took us that long to talk about a 2 minute song, they don't know what's coming in the next track.
Oh, comely.
Oh, Comely is the eighth track. It's the one I mentioned at the beginning. This is like I didn't have that sort of visceral reaction because of the song. The song was the one that was on while I was writing it down.
Hmm.
But that being said, this is easily my favorite song on the album. The
Okay.
guitar
Okay.
tone on it is just so crisp and great, like you mentioned earlier. It's
Hmm.
just it's so good, so good. The voice, the melodies, just it's an 8 minute acoustic guitar mostly, and his voice. It gives me those Jose Gonzales vibes that are just it's fantastic. It's the longest track on this album. It's fucking 8 minutes, almost eight and a
Yeah.
half. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so good. It's so good. I love it.
I 100% agree with you that this is so good. I can't say it's my favorite song on the album because I don't have. I am way far beyond having a favorite song on this album. Like,
Yeah,
but it is a very, very, very good song. And the little tidbit that I was going to say about this song is that so Jeff Mangum did his entire take on this album in one take, or on this song in one take, just his whole part, the
yeah,
guitar, the singing, all of it in one take. And if you listen really closely at the end, you can hear somebody in the background shout, "Holy shit!" Because
yep,
they're just like
yeah. It
enamored with the
was
fact that he did that.
yeah, it was supposed to be a test run, I think, initially, where it was just like making sure that the levels and stuff were set, and he was just going to do like a verse, and then
Hmm.
he just kind of went for it because he was feeling it, and everyone just kind of like there was some imagery. Someone else posted that there were just like 20 people. I guess it was a quote from the producer, which is Rob Schneider,
Hmm.
Dr. Rob,
Dr. Rob.
that he remembers just like sitting in the booth while Jeff was doing his thing, and there were like 20 people all crowded around him, all just kind of like watching and listening in amazement that he was just keeping it going for what was supposed to have just been a test run. And he fucking one takes it, and it is my favorite song on the album before knowing that, and it's incredible.
Oh, oh man. But yeah, it's just the way that this song just kind of naturally progresses.
Yeah,
I mean, it you can once you hear that, you can kind of understand that he did it in one take, and that's the highest of compliments I think to this song is that like you can tell it's just so natural, I guess, the way it kind of ebbs and flows
right.
with there's parts that are way more higher energy than other parts,
Yes.
and it just fits the song pretty like very well.
Yeah, to that extent. There are 5 verses in this. I wrote notes for each different verse, plus the chorus and some stuff, because like that's just what we're doing with this album. Because there's a lot
Yeah.
of lyrical content to digest.
Oh yeah.
But the first verse, from what I got out of it, was about a lover dying and remembering the sexual encounter as their last memory, but it didn't actually happen the way they think they did. Kind of harkening back to the first song or even the prior song, where there's this idea of what was happening versus what was actually happening, but it was still kind of like this very sexual thing. And then verse 2 comes in. It seems like it's maybe another sexual memory or maybe the real interpretation of what happened in verse 1 about giving a guy a blowjob to try to like
Hmm.
form some sort of real relationship, which he mentions like having a friend to say comforting things is what they were hoping to get out of it. But
Hmm.
the singer from his perspective sees this guy as an enemy, implying that the singer maybe wants to be the person that he's singing about to be his and only his kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then the chorus comes in and it kind of builds towards this climax, which, sexual climax, whatever. But it's the song climax and it's this lyrical climax of the thing. And then verse 3 is the climax. Like this whole verse just has a
Hmm.
lot of energy in it. It's got a lot of like weird imagery with it, and then it kind of starts to come down a bit. Where verse 4, it seems to imply that the singer had sex with Anne Frank or wanted to, but she had died, and now he can't. Which
Yep.
if he has this fascination with Anne Frank, he's been reading her journal, kind of living vicariously through her as if she is real, kind of thing. It makes sense, but maybe to a bit of an unhealthy extreme. And then I got to verse 5, and I literally wrote, "You lost me." Genius commenters tie this to another track of his about Siamese twin, but I'm not really sure how it relates to the song. I found out
Hmm.
later that this is just a thing that Jeff does, where he ties in a lot, even within this album. I'll get into this a bit more, but he ties a lot of things together and just kind of like mashes it up in such a way that it's not necessarily one coherent story.
Yeah. That. Yeah. He he has a very abstract way of tying things together, thinking, I guess, songwriting. I think in the sense that there's some things that just really, I mean, don't make sense sometimes, but like you can kind of piece them together to make sense, or like they only make sense in a very specific context, or just like, I don't know. There's just some
Yeah,
weird references which I've listened to. I mean, I think I've listened to every song that he's ever recorded. Not 100% sure, but I hear some of the references sometimes, and I'm just kind of like, "Yep."
Yeah, they're like characters that he pulls in from other works that he's done,
Yeah,
which is
but
interesting.
as far as I'll break it down verse by verse, I'll try to keep it succinct as well.
Yeah, go for it.
And so one thing that I just wanted to point off the bat is that on this song, this is where his iron lungs really come into play. Like he just sings and never takes a breath. Like I don't
Yeah,
understand how he does it, and it's pretty fitting that the first line is "Oh comely, I will be with you when you lose your breath," and it just
yeah,
I don't know if he meant to do that. I'm sure he didn't because
yeah.
I'm
There was
pretty
an unintentional
yeah
happy accident.
I'm pretty sure I will be with you when you lose your breath. Like I don't know if that is talking about like the gasp of an orgasm or dying.
Or
Like I
both.
or both. Like honestly, I have no clue. But given the like topic of communist daughter, I kind of think that it's the former.
Yeah, I mean, he mentions in that verse a terrible scene that was doing her thing on your chest,
Yeah,
so it still definitely has some of that sexual context to it.
yeah, and it's this is yeah that this first verse is one of the things I was talking about where people like tie it specifically to a line in Anne Frank's diary, which people are talking like me. I kind of just got it as you're trying to chase a feeling through sexuality, which like is a theme that happens. Like you're just trying to grasp for anything, which is kind of a theme that's elaborated on later in the second verse where you're talking about. Because I'm 100% with you on the second verse, like entirely. I think it is about trying to just gain a relationship through some sort of sexual act and it just being like, no, that's not how this works. There isn't
Right.
such one friend that you could find here. And yeah, I don't know. And then with the, it makes me think, well, I'm pretty sure that Jeff Mangum just wants to be with Anne Frank. Like
Hmm.
I think at least in this part of wherever he was at in his life when writing this, I'm pretty sure he wanted like an extremely deep relationship with Anne Frank.
Right.
And
Or maybe he feels like
considering,
he already had it because he's
yeah,
kind of been
yeah,
living through her journal, kind of a thing.
I think he does actually. Like, I think that's a better observation. Like, I think he does feel like that, and he brings in the metaphor between her diary being a mouth again, moving your mouth to pull out all your miracles aimed for me. Like, so he's saying these things are aimed directly at me. I'm reading this book, and the things in it are for me. Like they're mine. You're saying them to me, not to anybody else. Which goes back to the thought of he's my only enemy. I'll crush him with everything I own. Like maybe he's feeling some sort of jealousy because Anne Frank does want somebody in her book. There's, I guess, Peter was his name. I've never read her diary or anything, but
Yeah.
she's interested in guys and a girl in her book.
And
So
it's not him.
he may be feeling jealousy at that because he's just so deep in it. But then it's the third verse is where it just gets weird because he's talking about like the first line is your father made fetuses with flesh licking ladies while you and your mother were asleep in the trailer park. Like that line is pretty self explanatory, at
Right.
least on the surface. The dad is out with prostitutes, getting them pregnant. I'm in while the family is just living in squalor. So,
Yeah.
not saying that a trailer park is a shitty place to live. I'm just saying, like, the imagery brought forth in this song
Right.
seems to indicate that it's like, well, we're just stuck here not having
We're
anything while
being
you're out.
humble, low income kind of thing.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, you're just out fucking whores.
yeah, exactly. Like, and that kind of introduces the opposite side of sexuality, where before he kind of viewed it as it was always like the young couple was experiencing this pleasure together, or Anne Frank is upstairs, like masturbating while everything's going crazy outside. Now that the old person, the father, is doing it, it's this sin, it's this sick
Yeah.
thing that is being twisted into something terrible. But it's, I don't know. I don't know. This song also has, I think, one of the seminal lines on this album in just the fourth verse. It's I know they buried her body with others, her sister and mother and 500 families. And will she remember me 50 years later? I wish I could save her in some sort of time machine, which is just
Right.
like it's just intense talking about mass graves. He knows like that Anne Frank, her sister, and her mother were all just, to be quite to the point, just thrown in a pile
Right.
with no regard for the fact that they were people, or they are people. And he's it's instantly put against, and will she remember me 50 years later? So I'm thinking this is some sort of like mental break that Jeff is having while reading this, where
Right.
he's like, all of these lines she was saying are they're for me. Is she gonna remember me like down the line? Like if he's experiencing her life through her, maybe he's in some sort of state where he thinks this is happening to him and she's the reader, and it's wondering if she'll remember him, or if he's thinking that maybe this album is like his diary that is going to cause him to be remembered 50 years later, or just he's playing just in general, because there's a lot of themes of nostalgia and living on past yourself through memory. Just it's a very weird line that I kind of don't entirely understand right now.
So an alternate interpretation would be kind of tying in some of the more religious things and the whole aspect of dying and going to a heaven. Maybe he's saying like, hey, if I'm singing the praises of her, if I'm forming this connection with her and I'm caring for her in such an extreme way, when I die in 50 years, is she going to be like, are we going to be friends when we're both up in heaven having this kind of this afterlife kind of a thing?
Wow, I like that a lot. That was awesome. Holy shit, man. Yeah, that's not even one I've seen posted anywhere, but I think that's probably the best, because if this heaven exists, is she watching him
Right.
have this love for her? And yeah, I like it. I like that a lot.
Go
Ah,
on. Go on to the last verse, Joey.
oh
Explain the
my god.
last verse to me.
Goldeline, my dear. Well, okay. Goldeline, my dear, we will fold and freeze together. It's Goldeline. It's another song. Yeah, it's the song you were talking. It's the name of the song that you were talking about Siamese sisters. That in this song, the sisters are about to be eaten by some sort of beast or something. But like, I don't entirely understand why it's
How it ties in.
why
Yeah.
it's in there, unless he's just talking. He's using Goldeline. If it's about Siamese twins, it's talking about, I mean, referencing the two-headed boy,
Yeah.
which the two-headed boy could be a Siamese twin, or he's talking about Anne Frank. She was in the camp with her sister Margot. He's just using that as like, now that they're in this extremely trying time, they're so close to each other that they
They're
might as well be.
basically one person. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's we will fold and freeze together far away from here. The sun, there is sun and spring and green forever. Talking about, well, when we finally we're gonna die together, and when we do, we're gonna be in a better place. Like that's kind of, but I mean, I don't know if that's too surface for what whatever's
Yeah.
been going on,
I mean, I'm
but
sure there's 50 other interpretations.
like it's yeah, that's just, oh man, oh man.
I don't think that's much of a stretch because I mean, like I said, he's mentioned before on the album kind of dying and being okay with dying because you're going to go to heaven. And when he
Hmm.
gets to heaven, he's hoping that he and Anne Frank can have this relationship kind of thing as ghosts, perhaps.
Yeah, and oh yeah, also, before we move on, there is one there's one last line, and it's the but now we move to feel for ourselves inside some stranger's stomach. There is an extremely dark, but I think it might be correct. I'm trying to remember what song it was on, but it's on a previous song. I think it was on King of Carrot Flowers Part 3, I believe. Sometimes I get those songs all like the first three
Yeah,
songs they blend together into one song, but it's it's kind of extremely dark, I guess.
lay it
But
on me.
so there's the line, it's talking about a baby being stuck inside its mother, or I will float until I learn how to swim inside my mother in a garbage can. I believe
Right.
it's. I don't know if that's the exact lyric right now. I have too many
Yeah,
things happening through my head. Yeah, but it's
that's close enough. I
it
remember
seems to
saying that.
yeah it seems to be referencing pregnant women who were killed during the Holocaust, or just in general, just a baby, which is also imagery that's brought in kind of in Two-Headed Boy, somebody floating in a jar, except
Yeah,
this jar is a womb, and it's just floating there in that, and the inside the mother in a garbage bin is talking about how they're just tossed like garbage into a hole. But I don't know, it's just the amount of tying things into other lines that he has in these things, like some sort of woven net
yeah.
of craziness, like that just it gets me. I don't know. Like
To
it
add
just
to add another string to that, he could be just referencing the verse earlier in the line, because so the line is, "But now we move to feel for ourselves inside some stranger's stomach."
mhm.
Earlier in the song, he's talking about how the character's father was out fucking whores and getting them pregnant. So that could be another tie in
Oh
there, where he's feeling for the children that are being birthed without a father because their father's already in this, trailer
yeah,
park relationship kind of a thing.
there's too many things.
So many connections.
Man, I wish I could just talk to Mr. Mangum, but I can't because he doesn't know me. But
No, I thought you were going to say that because he died and he was now a
oh
ghost.
no, nope, he's not a ghost, but the ghost of his memory will live on inside of me forever.
That sounds dirty.
Yeah, it is. It
But I mean, this
is.
album sounds dirty. So, speaking of
So
dirty sounding songs and also ghosts, track 9 is Ghost, and boy, it's got some fuzzy ass bass. It's just
th-
like,
this
the fu-
song,
it's fuzzy.
I'll go ahead and say it. This was my favorite song before I got rid of favorites. I
Okay.
guess it could have been a tie between "Oh Comely" and "Ghost," but it's really only because of a specific part of the song. And it's kind of something that like I've talked about previously. Which I mean, like you said, this I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the music first because it wasn't music related. But it's yeah, I just really like the horns, the fuzzy bass, the DDDs.
Yeah.
It's
He does
just,
that a lot throughout this album.
mhm. But in this song, man, they're just super great.
There's something else. Yeah, it's got this like building energy throughout that kind of leads to an explosion at the end with the what you call the singing saw, which
Yeah.
is kind of a cool climax of the song.
Oh yeah. It's it's just great. And man, so I'm gonna let I want you to talk about any lyrical stuff you have to do because I don't know how long I'm gonna be talking about it, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna try to make it not that long. But
I'm gonna keep mine short. I didn't have a lot of notes for this one anyway. It seemed to be about the ghost of Anne Frank inhabiting someone. It was not super clear, but it seemed like he was implying that it was someone that the singer loved. Like he had a loved one that he was in a relationship with, and the ghost of Anne Frank was inhabiting this person. Maybe that's him projecting, pretending that his partner is Anne Frank, kind of a thing, without them knowing about it, which is kind of fucked up. But
hmm
the chorus is about accepting death as a good thing, not to be afraid of, kind of again that theme that's been talked on. And then the second verse is less specific to Anne Frank and is about girls killing themselves by jumping off buildings in New York City back in the day. I know there were a lot of like factory fires and shit that people would just end up jumping out of windows and shit, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And the whole song just kind of has that feeling of accepting death for what it is and not fearing it. But I'm sure you have a lot more to say.
Well, I'll try to keep it as short as I possibly can.
I mean, we're
And
already almost at an hour and a half, so
oh
just
my
just
god.
take as long as you need.
Well, okay. But yeah, I've read that what he said about the song is that it started because he thought that like his recording studio or his apartment was haunted, and he was talking to the ghost, but then he was like realizing that the ghost was like just something that was inside of him and not like an outside force, I guess.
Right.
So that was where the ghost, I know you live within me part came from. But yeah, so it starts off, the first verse references Anne Frank and talking, I mean, just the whole album has been referencing Anne Frank, referencing the time of World War II, referencing that, and just talking about kind of living vicariously through her, experiencing what maybe she must have been thinking, what kind of just how crazy and absolutely just insane it is that there were people that had to live thinking the things that she thought, much less teenagers or children that had to live thinking the things that she thought. And I guess going beyond empathy and just him actually stepping into her mind through her diary, like he's just gotten an obsession,
Yeah,
quite
he's
frankly.
gotten very intimately involved in her life.
Yeah, like he's just extremely into her life. So, but yeah, it's talking about her in the first verse, and it ends. I mean, it has the chorus right after that first verse talking about how she's no longer afraid to die. She to watch the morning paper blow into a hole where no one can escape kind of makes me think about, I don't know, the morning paper makes me think of the news, obviously.
Right.
And the news is just reporting on things that happen, which if something happened to you the day before, it gets reported on, and then what do? You have a headline that has your name in it or whatever, and you can save it, and it's just another example of the way that events are recorded and continue to go on forever as long as those newspapers are there. So it's another way of immortality through memory, through print, through a medium of some sort. And maybe that's why she's not afraid of death, is because she knows she'll go on, live on forever through something like that. I
I
don't, I don't know.
I don't have a counterpoint necessarily per se, but in my mind, I mean, the quote is to watch the morning paper blow into a hole where no one can escape kind of gives me the opposite feeling of
Hmm.
what you were just explaining, in that, like, yeah, it's being reported, but nobody's actually going to remember because it's going to get blown into a hole somewhere and no one's ever going to see it. No one's ever going to remember that it happened. So maybe it's a wider context. I don't have a solution to hand, but maybe it's a wider context of like how all of these fucked up things happen and people just seem to forget, or they're not as upset about them as they should be because it just happens so fucking often.
That could be, that 100% could be, especially with the lyrics earlier. At this point, I can't even remember what song it was on, just because everything is blending together. But we were
Right.
talking about him after he dies, whenever he's young, standing in heaven. I think it was in the airplane over the sea. But whenever they're standing up in the clouds, looking down at the world, laughing out loud, just just thinking about their life and just knowing that there's an afterlife, not worrying about it, and like you said, maybe just the fact that it's just all going to end and it doesn't matter, like is
Yeah.
I don't know. But then to make reference to the portal that is Anne Frank's diary and all of this, he does relate her to the stories of apparently what he's talking about in whenever he's talking about the woman jumping off the apartment building in New York City is like landlords would burn apartment buildings with tenants in them to like collect insurance or something back in like the 80s, and he was just deeply affected by one time when he heard about this, because I actually have heard a live record or a few live recordings where he plays this song, And right before this verse comes on, he says something to the effects of, "And this is a true story," right before he talks about this. But so I've just looked into it, and that seems to be what he was referencing whenever he wrote this. But I like how he once again bridges the gap between the past and the present, which in my mind is through the morning paper, not Anne Frank's diary this time. It's like the
Yeah.
paper is something that is printed every day. It's always, and even if it is going into a hole somewhere and nobody's reading it, it's still being printed. It's being reported on. It's a medium that is continuous. So I don't know. It's just ever present, I guess.
Yeah, for now. We'll see if the newspaper seems like it's
Yeah,
probably dying, but
yeah.
you know,
But it wasn't in 1998.
it sure wasn't. It's insane.
But
1998.
yeah,
Total sidebar. That was 22 years ago, Joey.
that's
Fucking,
that's
we are growing people.
pretty nuts. I'm an old guy now, even though I guess I shouldn't say that. But
Yeah, there are older people, but we are also older than a lot of other people. So
there we go.
whatever.
That's what I'll say.
Indeed.
But I as far as that song goes, I'm just gonna stop talking.
Well, you're just trying to make me do the segue, and there's not really one I can make because the next track's untitled. At least
Yeah,
officially, it's untitled.
it is officially untitled. People have come up with names for it, but it is officially untitled. So
Well, so from what I saw on Genius, at least, is that there have been like tour posters or other marketing material for
hmm
this album that have a song title for it.
yeah,
So it's just, I don't know. It's untitled on my music service, which is YouTube Music. It's untitled in a lot of places, but there may be an unofficial title, I guess.
yeah. Unless there was other editions of this album that went out with the title on it, the main edition printing of this album had the track listed as untitled. So
Yep, it's another instrumental track for one, and it blends in. I mentioned that at the beginning of the last track, which seems so long ago because we talked so long about the lyrics, that the whole song just kind of builds musically, and it has this kind of explosion at the end with the singing saw that blends into the next track, track 10, which is untitled, where it kind of has this fallout of the explosion from the prior track, and then it kind of comes in. It's just like a fun jam track. It's a
yeah.
musical track. It's got some cool organs. It's got a fun drum beat. It's got some fucking bagpipes, which is
Oh
kind of
yeah.
an interesting tie-in, I think, in that bagpipes, at least in certain areas, are played at like funeral marches and stuff, kind of
hmm
reiterating this whole death as a celebration motif that's been going on through the album.
Yeah. I definitely get the celebration of death aspect. Like, I don't know. I for one love the bagpipes
Yeah,
because they're just screaming throughout the song. Like whoever's playing these bagpipes is going nuts on them.
they're having a fun time.
Unless there's probably some person out there who's super good at bagpipes. It's like actually that's just how you play the bagpipes. But
Yeah, that's just bagpiping, bro.
but if it is, I love bagpipes. I've never heard a bagpipe I don't like, especially in this song. But just yeah, with it coming off of the heels of Ghost, where it's talking about remembrance through death or just acceptance of death and not being afraid of it, it very much feels like uh, okay, the life is complete, but let's celebrate it. Let's connect it to the future through through remembrance. Let's keep the memory alive, even though the
Right.
person is not anymore.
Keep those newspaper clippings, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. You find them in that hole that nobody goes through, and just cut them out.
Yeah. That's about all I got for this track. So unless you have anything else to add,
No, I don't.
we will conclude this album and the story, perhaps, of Two Headed Boy in what is aptly named Two Headed Boy Part 2.
This
We're
song,
at the end. How do you feel? You seem like you have strong feelings towards the first part. I'm sure you have stronger feelings towards the second part.
I'm going to go ahead and say probably the most intense statement of my life, but this is absolutely, without a doubt, the best end track of an album I have ever heard in my life.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Yeah, it's got musically, it's got some weird, creepy synths that come in. There's some weird brass effects, giving it this almost off-putting intro,
yeah,
and then the acoustic and vocals come in again, and it's just again like anytime It's just him and his guitar. I fucking love it. I like his voice a whole lot on this track specifically. It's just it I love it. I love it. I love
Man,
it.
it's yeah, me too. It's I feel that entirely, but oh my god, it's I need to say other things other than just like, oh my god, I
Look,
love it.
honestly, if you've made it through this episode thus far and haven't listened to the album somehow, go listen to the album. You'll agree with us, and if you don't agree with us, let us know. I'll fight you in the comments. You know, but we can get to that.
You could listen to this whole album like 3 times in the amount of time that we've taken.
Yeah, that's true. We've been rambling on for a while, but
At
we're not
least
done
two
yet.
times. Yeah,
We're gonna
not
keep
yet.
rambling.
Almost there though.
Almost
Probably.
lyrically, this one it it kind of tied some things together for me, but also made some things a little bit less clear in doing so. Verse one to me, it seemed like he was asking his father to remember how he felt when the singer was born, and how the singer wants to feel the same thing of maybe having his own kid or
Hmm.
something. Verse two, it wasn't super clear. He makes he ties back to Anne Frank by talking about
Hmm.
wings in her spine, which was mentioned in Ghost, I think.
Hmm.
So he's talking about her love to be a brother with a brother of mine, how he'd love to find your tongue in his teeth. So it kind of like seems like he's trying to hook her up with his brother, which maybe if he's a two-headed boy, he's just really like saying, hey, like maybe go out with him at least, and then like I'll be able to vicariously feel it because we're the same person, kind of a dealio, which is weird as hell, but that's kind of tying in the two-headed boy thing into the Anne Frank arc as well.
Yeah.
There's a bridge where he seems to be dreaming that Anne is alive and making out with him and having that close relationship with him. Verse 3 implies that he and his brother were conjoined, which again makes sense for the whole two-headed boy angle instead of him being a hermaphrodite maybe, but it could also be a double meaning of kind of just having that weird mutation kind of thing going on, which kind of, well, I'll say that to the end. The bridge brings back the theme of heaven being the afterlife kind of a thing. And then in the outro, it refers to a scientist that gave him parts to make a radio to play the songs that he played for his lover when she died, kind of a thing. So
Hmm.
it's not really clear to me if his lover was another experiment or someone else being experimented on, or if it was the scientist that was helping him, make his time a little bit easier or not. There's a whole lot going on, and this is the kind of thing I was wanting to talk about, is that he ties in and blends and mashes together so many different characters and so many different themes from different songs on this album, different songs off this album, different ideas he's had just in general. Like apparently there's a lot of things that he had that were not on this album that he has kind of mashed in here, and that gives it that kind of convoluted uncertainty that
Yeah.
I've been feeling.
Yeah. He has like such a huge web of songs that didn't make it on albums that he wrote that made it onto like EPs that only got released off of like they sold a few hundred copies to people and whatever. Like there's just so many references in this that even if you have all the references, it's just so nuts to try to put together that it's just like, does it? You kind of have to kind of read between the lines and just be like, what could this possibly mean? And try to, I don't know,
Yeah.
piece it together for yourself, which I kind of like, but I could definitely see how it would put some people off of it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily off-putting. It's just like there, it requires a whole lot more thought and interpretation and research, knowing him and what he's done to
Yeah.
kind of get the full context. I will say though, the song, like as I kind of went through the verses, maybe it wasn't super clear, but it starts with him talking about birth and ends with him talking about death
Hmm.
in such a way which is kind of summing up the entire album thus far. Like the rest of the album, he talks about the two-headed boy, he talks about Anne Frank, he talks about being born or being young, and then he talks about death, and this song just kind of cohesively kind of runs through all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll go over some of the lyrics then.
Hit me.
I'm not gonna have too much different than you, other than I don't know. Okay, I'll
Just
just
go
I'll just
through it.
I'll just do it. Yeah. Okay. Verse 1. The first line, Daddy, please hear the song that I sing. In your heart, there's a spark that just screams. So, we go back to King of Carrot Flowers parts 1 through 3, the father is the one who is kind of portrayed as the victim in his relationship. The mother is just beating the
An alcoholic and abusive.
yeah, and he's looking for a way out. Like he is actively trying. He's wanting to kill himself, but just can't find the gall to do it. There's a
Yes.
spark in his heart that is just screaming. But now his kid is coming to him, just wanting him to hear this song, trying to give him any reason to carry on, maybe help, try to do something to get him out of the situation, just anything. And for a lover to bring a child to your chest that could lay as you sleep and love all you have left, like your body, like your boy used to be. Sorry, I'm reading instead of remembering right now
Yeah.
because but it's just, this line hits extremely powerfully because he's trying to get the dead to remember how things used to be, like how it feels to have a child, how it feels to this. But there's so many themes of immortality through outside forces that to bring it all in with a child, the greatest example of that, like, and nostalgia, remembering back to the past, remembering your past, they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's explaining his legacy, past, present, and future, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and you can live vicariously through your child. Like, if you can help foster your children to have similar good experiences that you did. Like, okay, you did something extremely fun when you were a kid. Maybe you went on a trip somewhere. You can take your kid on that same trip and get a glimpse of the feeling of experience, exploration, and wonder through a kid. Like, it doesn't always have to be the young children are the ones experiencing love, and the adults or the elders are the ones causing all this harm and pain. It can be each other helping them out. The older generation can help the younger generation to experience all these things that they know are fun. The younger generation can help the older generation remember what that felt like to be in that position, even though the world has made them cold and bitter and
Yeah.
made them, I don't know. It's a good feeling, one that I get to experience kind of firsthand now, which is another thing. Like, whenever I heard this song, whenever I was about to have a daughter, it kind of just hit an extra layer for me.
Right.
So, but that's verse 1.
Verse two.
But verse verse 2, I honestly think there's just a lot of references to other songs. Like, he's got, like you said, the Wings reference is a reference to Ghost. I think he's referencing uh, just a brother, in the sense of maybe two-headed boy is the a brother, or maybe he considers each of the heads to be a brother. I'm not 100% sure, like, how he'd
Right.
love to find your tongue in his teeth. I don't know if he's referencing the fact that he's referencing sexuality. I don't know if he's referencing the fact that Anne Frank's diary is portrayed as a mouth in other songs, and the teeth may be the words, like he's wanting to speak the words through his own mouth. Maybe I'm
I can
I,
see it.
I'm honest, like,
You're not stretching too far.
yeah, like, that's the thing. There's so many times where I'm like, am I stretching too far? And then I remember the album I'm talking about, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess not. But so then it hits into the bridge, which, I don't know. And in my dreams you're alive and you're crying as your mouth moves in mine, soft and sweet. So the mouth, once again, is Anne Frank's diary. It is moving in his own mouth. He feels as though he's experienced her. He is speaking at the same time she is speaking in her diary. He is experiencing her life through that diary, and he's so much so that he's dreaming that she's alive and crying for, I mean, any number of reasons. There are, like, literally, there's so many reasons that she could be
Yeah.
crying just in this album alone, forgetting about even what she was actually experiencing, but just for the reasons that he's talked about in this album. But it's, oh man. And then
Yeah. He's
verse
just trying to
3,
comfort her in those times.
yeah, yeah. Verse 3 is one that I originally had some other thoughts on, but after doing some research, apparently the brother of someone very close to Jeff committed suicide around the time he was like writing the song.
Oh.
And that is another thing. Like, I don't, he was, it hit him where, I mean, it's a pretty graphic line.
Right.
And you left with your head filled with flames, and you watched as your brains fell out through your teeth, push the pieces in place. So, like, I don't know if the teeth not only are literal teeth of a person who's committed suicide, but also referencing the diary. But I don't, and he's trying to
Yeah.
push the pieces back into place of his life, of the actual physical body of this person who I'm presuming died, committed suicide from a gunshot wound to the face.
Right.
Like, I don't, but he's also talking about pushing the teeth back into place to make the smile sweet to see. So don't you take this away. I'm still wanting my face on your cheek. Like, he's longing for some sort of, he's wanting to push everything back to the way it was, even though it can't be, just so he can feel this sort of intimacy with this person, which, I mean, is it's an emotion that Anne Frank in her diary was talking about, wanting to be able to be intimate with somebody, just feel something with somebody else, and just that, I mean, it's a theme that's just been talked about through this whole album.
Right.
Oh man. And then the second bridge.
Yep.
Oh my
We're almost
god.
there.
And when we break, we'll wait for our miracle. This God is a place where some holy spectacle, like this bridge, man, this fucking bridge. So, and when we break, that always, to me, when we break from reality, when we die, we're waiting for this miracle to happen. We're waiting for heaven. We're waiting something, because God is a place where some holy spectacle lies. Like a spectacle, you think of like I don't know. I think of like a sideshow attraction, like some sort of attraction, like like, oh, look at that
Yeah,
thing over
something to
there.
be wowed by.
Yeah, and you're just waiting for it. And that must have been how people felt, like, if he's experiencing through them, if he's experiencing life through her eyes, and the experiences that he's had with religion previously are not great, one might start to wonder, how could there be a God? How could there be this? Is God just some idea that people are having to help make themselves feel better? Is God real? Is any of this real? And like questioning it, and maybe it's all just a spectacle. Maybe it's all just a smoke and mirrors show that's meant to wow you until you're actually there to experience it. And that is almost reiterated in the second line, where it comes back, when we break, we'll wait for our miracle. God is a place you will wait for the rest of your life. Like,
Right.
you're gonna be waiting there. And if we're talking about for the rest of your life, and they're already dead, we're talking about previously, uh, what was it, Holland 1945, whenever he talks about burying Anne Frank being buried alive, in the sense that she still had such a life to live, where she was essentially still alive, and she's living through her diary. She's always going to be alive as long as there's people out there willing to read her story, or
Right.
her story is still being printed. So she is still alive, and she is waiting for some sort of answer for the rest of her life, which will be forever, because she will live on through all of these stories and books.
Yeah, or
It's,
it could be maybe less. It could be just like a poor arrangement of words. Maybe not a poor arrangement, but one that fit better. And he's saying that you will be waiting for the rest of your life, not necessarily for Anne Frank, but for everyone is just
yeah,
going to be waiting the rest of their life to die
that's
and
true.
get to this heaven if it exists, and that's all they're going to be waiting for, which is kind of a dark, maybe almost suicidal kind of way of looking at things. But like, that's kind of like, I don't want to. Yeah, fuck it. I don't care if I offend any religious people, but like it's there's the spectacle. Like you mentioned, you were raised in a very Catholic way, and you had this idea of God. And I feel like it's not a far stretch to say that a lot of older people that find religion later in life, or that cling to that, are just kind of like waiting to die because they've clung to the idea of this afterlife that has been painted for them as being so like perfect, and they're not going to kill themselves. Maybe like the father was too quote unquote afraid. That makes it sound bad. It's a good thing to be afraid of killing yourself.
Yeah.
But maybe they're just like, well, I'm just going to live out the rest of my days as boringly as possible, because at the end it's not going to matter. I'm going to die and I'm going to be in a better place, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And dying and being in a better place is definitely something that comes through occasionally, like previously in this album. Like just the thought that, oh yeah, well, whenever it ends, we're gonna be like, I'm not afraid to die because whenever I die, I'll be in a better place, or I'll be remembered,
Right.
or like whatever. But then this kind of paints a much darker picture of that, like you said. Like, and I mean, since it's already out there, yeah, why not? I'll hop on the train too. I'm not gonna sit here and bash religion or anything, but it's like the way that this kind of paints it is like it could be. I don't want to say a cop out, but like more like a coping mechanism for
Right.
dying. Like the people are clinging to the thought of this because they can't handle the
The thought
thought
of there
of
not being anything afterwards.
yeah, exactly, and not like I don't know. Maybe that sounds too harsh and cold, but like I
No,
think,
I mean the
like
unknown is scary. I think maybe
yeah,
this isn't a popular opinion, but I think that's like what faith is all about. Is not necessarily a distraction from a potential reality, but it's like you said, a coping mechanism. It's something that like it'll give you comfort when you die, which is arguably the scariest part of your life is dying and not really knowing what's going to happen after you die.
yeah, and I mean, like yeah, everybody has a different way of like if that's which I hate to say it this way, but like if that's something that you're extremely afraid of, which completely justified if it is, if
Yeah,
like there may literally just not be another way for you to comprehend that thought other than whatever you choose to believe in, whatever you choose to do, like however you do it, like
yeah,
believe in it, but like just in this situation, that seems to be the picture that he's painting, where it's like, well, we're here and we're waiting now, and we're just gonna wait forever and forever, and okay, there's nothing. Like
yeah. Whether
it's
that's
just
in life before you die or after you die, and find nothing.
yeah, yeah. But then the outro, two-headed boy comes back. This now I think that Jeff is, or yeah, I think two-headed boy is a metaphor for Jeff in the real world, who one head is Jeff, who is rooted in reality, and one is him, who is living through the diary of Anne Frank. And She Is All You Could Need is explicitly just talking about Anne Frank is who he needs, and I don't know. And but Don't Hate Her When She Gets Up to Leave is him closing the book
I can see
and
that.
not reading it anymore.
Yeah,
And just the way this song ends, the way this album ends, he just puts down his guitar and you can hear him walk out of the studio.
yeah. It says, "Don't hate her when she gets up to leave," and then he gets up to leave,
Yep.
which is it's nice. I enjoy hearing those little like studio snippets of whatever's happening in the studio, like you mentioned on "O Comely," where someone just is just ecstatic and impressed and awed that he did it in one take. Just being able to hear that kind of adds to the realness of the album that
Yeah.
I kind of enjoy.
Oh my god, man.
Jesus, man, we did it. We got through this album. We're closing in on the 2 hour mark,
Oh
but
my god.
it's gonna be a
Sorry,
beast. It's
everybody.
gonna be a beast to edit, but it'll happen.
Sorry, Jeremy, actually.
Overall, I might just upload this with no editing at
Just
all and just
do it.
say deal with it. But overall, I think I do really love this album. The lyrics took a whole lot more time to analyze and for us to discuss than I anticipated, which is not great for me who procrastinates and waits the last minute to get my notes together. But that's a me problem more than the album problem. As mentioned, it seems like he has this history of blending a lot of different story strings together so that there's not necessarily a clear storyline on this album. But it is an interesting concept of having all of these different like moving parts that are all also kind of relating to the same thing. I really, really,
Yeah.
really like the music on this album, and we'll definitely listen to it more in the future. Probably not paying as much attention to the lyrics, although now that it's all been kind of explained, I probably won't be able to put it out. But I can 100% confidently say that this album is a masterpiece, regardless of how I feel about the lyrics and if it makes sense. It's a good listen. I will be listening to this album more.
That is awesome to hear. This is this is definitely. I would also join you in saying that this album is a masterpiece. It is a freak of nature, in my opinion. Like,
It is a two-headed boy.
it is a two-headed boy. It's like I hate confidently declaring anything as my favorite anything, but most of the time, this is my favorite album, I'd say.
Interesting.
So
So it's all downhill. No matter what album we talk about next, it's not going to live up to the expectations. Now we've peaked for you, and it's nothing's going to compare.
no, see, now begins the excitement because I get to find my favorite album.
Your new favorite, the next
My
favorite
new
album.
Yeah.
I
I
don't.
it's yeah, it's just it's I don't know. It's in a category of its own, honestly. Like I have
Yeah,
so many other albums that I love, but this
yeah.
one's just
Honestly,
way up
like the three albums leading up to this, just they pale in comparison easily
there. Yeah.
to this album. This album is fantastic. I was okay with the other albums that we went through, but this one is just like it's in a league of its own. I think it's fantastic.
Well, that is awesome.
It is, and I'm excited that we got to go on this journey together and share it with you guys listening. So hopefully you guys had a similar experience. If you guys really love this album after having never heard of it or hearing it before, like let us know. If you're an experienced veteran and want to correct us on the interpretation of these lyrics, feel free to do so. I imagine that's the only kind of person that would listen through 2 hours of us talking about this album is someone waiting to correct
Yeah.
us for all of these things because they know better. But I don't care. Leave us comments. I'll fucking yell at you and tell you that you're full of shit and I'm right. And this song's really about some mutant created in a lab with lasers and shit. I don't know. I'll die on any hill.
Yeah, please. As long as we're dying on the hill with multiple views, because a
Exactly.
cult of rabid fans came and watched, listened to our podcast.
Yeah, fuck it. I'll take it. I'll take any glorious death I can. Next week, though, we're gonna get back into our regular alternation of I'm gonna recommend an album, then Joey will recommend an album. The album I'm recommending next week, and the album that we will be listening to this week to discuss next week, is as mentioned earlier, I kind of spoiled, is Jose Gonzales' first album, Veneer. It's from 2003. It's very folksy. It's a little rocky, but it's definitely not to the extent of any of the albums that we just did. It's definitely more of a folk album. But it's mostly just guitar and vocals, and I really like the dude's voice. I really like the dude's guitar, and I think Joey's gonna like it. This was a natural next step to me to kind of get us back into our normal routine, and then after that, who knows? Maybe we'll go and just go to do some metal or some rap or some entirely unrelated stuff. We'll see.
I've been with how comfortable I got in this album, like how comfortable I am in this album. I was doing some experimenting with my sonic palette this week, so I have a bunch of other genres that I've been exploring to
Okay.
maybe for future updates. Although I am extremely excited for this next album because I know it's somebody that you like, and it's tangentially related to Alexi Murdoch, which I ended up. I mean, I've listened to that album a, a little bit since we played it, but
Right.
it was an album that I liked, and if this guy's better than that, then that's awesome. I love folk music, so
Yeah, I don't want to say better. I will say different. I will say I
different.
prefer him more.
Well, there we
But
go.
that's how music is. Hopefully you prefer him more. If not, that's cool. I still love Jose Gonzalez. He has 3 albums, I think. This is his first one, which is a good starting point for his discography, as we kind of usually do anyway. But as mentioned, if you guys want to yell at us about this album, if you guys love Jose Gonzalez and want to talk to us before next week about it, hit us up. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the social media stuffs. We're on a bunch of platforms. We're on YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, soon to be Amazon Podcast still. I think we're set up for, I'm not sure when that launches, but we'll let you guys know when we are there. I think that's everything. Do you have? This was a long episode. We're just gonna take a deep breath here.
Oh,
That
oh
was
my
good.
god, this was so cathartic. Oh
It
my god.
was. This tension has been in my body for a full week, and it's nice to finally get it out and move on with my life in an entirely new life because that album is pretty impressive. Until then, though, and until we meet again, dear listeners, of which there are just dozens of hundreds of thousands of
Millions.
billions, stay in our feedback loop.